And then as I progressed with my diseases, I developed more autoimmune diseases, unfortunately. I've had symptoms for a while, but it took me like years to get all my diagnosis.
And I can't hide, 'cause growing pains are keeping me up at night. Welcome back to this week's episode on Take a Pain Check. I'm so excited to have Sharon joining me today. Hi, Sharon. Can you give me a brief introduction about yourself? Tell me a little bit about your education, your hobbies, your career, and like what you've been up to recently.
Yeah, of course. So I'm 23 years old and I recently graduated from UC Irvine in 2022. I'm currently applying to PA schools right now, and I'm on that journey of like holistically healing and then hopefully going to the healthcare field to help patients as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing. So, you're on this podcast because you're diagnosed with, I would say, more than one rheumatic disease and a bunch of other chronic illnesses. So, can you tell me a little bit about, what are your diagnoses and when were you diagnosed with each one of them?
So my first diagnosis was actually mixed connective tissue disease, and I was diagnosed with that in 2015. And then I was diagnosed with lupus around the same time in 2015. And then as I progressed with my diseases, I developed more autoimmune diseases, unfortunately. So I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia in 2016. I was diagnosed with scleroderma in 2021, and I was diagnosed with Sjogren's syndrome also end of 2021. And then I was recently diagnosed with POTS in May of 2023. So I've had symptoms for a while, but it took me like years to get all my diagnosis.
Oh my gosh. Okay. How do you know which condition is like impacting which part of your body or like how do you navigate all that? Because I feel like yes, they're all like in that category of like rheumatic disease and some of them are under like the chronic illness stuff, but how do you know like okay, my I don't know, wrist is turning today and it's because of this or like do you not know?
I feel like I don't know. I sometimes a lot of the symptoms overlap. So sometimes I'm able to distinguish it from being POTS versus like just being overwhelmed or being overheated. If, I get certain symptoms, like for me, my POTS is I get very blurry vision. I get really tired. My heart rate goes really high. So I know, okay, this is POTS. But when it comes to joint pain and when it comes to any other symptoms, it's kind of hard to distinguish. So I just have to kind of play it by ear and just make my best guess.
What symptoms led you to see a healthcare professional?
So when I was trying to take anything out of the fridge, my fingers would immediately go numb and go yellow, blue, and it was really concerning. And then I started to develop joint pain. So I was actually a gymnast at the time. So I was at the gym practicing, and I was getting a lot of wrist pain and then knee pain and then collarbone pain. And my coaches were very concerned because they were like, she's not faking it, like I genuinely love my sport. I genuinely loved what I did. So for me to be able to sit out, it was really hard for me. So that's what prompted my parents to take me to a doctor because I was in so much pain and I was losing circulation and I just wasn't feeling well.
And then how long did it take for you to get that first diagnosis?
I would say it took me about 6 months. So that's actually pretty short compared to a lot of people, but I also think it's because of where I was referred to. So I was referred to a big hospital in Los Angeles, which really helped me get my diagnosis quicker because they were very thorough and I had a really great healthcare team.
And so were you in like adult care when you were diagnosed?
No, I was actually in peds. So I was 14 when I was diagnosed.
Okay, so I feel like that changes a lot and like what I want to talk to you about too. So you were diagnosed as a teenager. What was it like being in school with this diagnosis? And then also like, having a bunch of other diagnoses after that.
It was really hard because nobody in my high school understood what lupus was. They didn't know what autoimmune was. I was on steroids, so my weight was fluctuating. I was on chemotherapy, so like I was losing my hair, and people were like, "Does she have cancer? Does she have, what's going on?" So it was very misunderstood, and nobody understood what it was. So I think the hardest part was explaining myself because people would be like, "Well, why does it happen? Like, why isn't there a cure? Like, why are you having all these symptoms? Like, what's the cause?" And for me to not know, I'm only 14, I don't know what's going on. So I think that was the hardest part of the disconnect between the understanding of what lupus was.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then for your other diagnoses, like what parts of your life were you in for that?
I was in college, which was really, really tough. A lot of the things that I went through actually happened during the pandemic, like getting my scleroderma diagnosis, and my Sjogren's diagnosis and POTS. POTS I've been actually dealing with for a while now. No one ever knew what it was, because a lot of my symptoms were just not accurate with like the POTS diagnosis. So it was really hard for me to get a true diagnosis. But yeah, I was in my undergrad, which was really tough. But I still managed to graduate within 4 years, which I have to give it to the pandemic because everything went online. So I was able to navigate a lot of my treatments and being able to rest and heal on my own time rather than having to go in person. So I think that was a really big thing for me.
And then I'm assuming it was hard for you going back to like your teenage years to explain to people like what lupus was, is what we kind of talked about. But what were the specific symptoms you were getting with that lupus diagnosis at that time?
I had a lot of joint pain, so I would often wear a lot of braces, like a lot of wrist braces, knee braces. I also was having like fevers, just a lot of fatigue and insomnia. So I was on steroids for a long while. So not being able to sleep and having to go to high school all day was very, very tough. And then I was also having a lot of symptoms of Raynaud's. So Raynaud's is when you lose circulation in your hands when you're cold or stressed. So my hands would go blue, they would go numb. I'm not able to use them. Like they literally just don't feel like actual, fingers to me. It just feels like very numb. So that was really tough for me because it's always cold in the classroom. So I wasn't able to write a lot of times. So I needed accommodations or I need someone to write for me, which was really tough because a lot of people were just like, she looks normal. Why can't she just write for herself? But they didn't understand that my hands were really a really big part of my symptoms.
Okay, so you had a scribe at certain times for like
Yes, you
accommodation.
could say. Yeah.
Okay, same here. So I feel that because it's definitely hard, especially like studying science and because you do want to be like a PA, but like, just like
Yeah.
going into that whole field, I feel like it's so hard living with a chronic illness because you do need accommodations and then you do have people discouraging you. But like, have you also had comments from teachers or like peers about those things?
Oh, definitely. Especially throughout college. I actually started my time at UC Irvine being pre-med. So the pre-med community is one of two ways that people have a lot of positive experiences and then negative experiences. And unfortunately, I did have a negative experience. People would tell me, because I receive accommodations, I get the easy way out. Or because I get extended time on exams, it's not fair to other students. Or, how do I expect to go through residency and medical school and all this other, all these exams, the MCAT that's 8 hours when I'm sick? Or how can you take care of others when you're sick? So that was really tough for me to navigate. And I actually, how I just dealt with that was I just, removed myself from, that environment and those people. And I was still passionate about pre-med until I went into the pandemic and I discovered the PA profession, which aligned more with my values and aligned more of like what I wanted to do. I really like the collaborative section of being a PA. I really like that they're able to switch specialties whenever they want, which was huge for me because I see so many specialties. I think I see over 10. So I want to give back to each one of them eventually as, I progress in my career.
Okay, so going to the specialist that you see, now that we've kind of mentioned it, what specialist you see? I know rheumatologist, but then I feel like there has to be more.
So I see rheumatology, I see cardiology, I see dermatology, I see orthopedic surgery, I see endocrinology,
Oh my
I
God,
see pulmonology, I see
crazy.
nephrology. List goes on and on. Yeah, I think those are the main ones that I see right now. But it's because lupus is a systemic disease, so it affects literally every single part of the body. So it's insane.
Yeah, but honestly, just going back to the whole like accommodations and then also kind of switching your career path like a little bit to kind of fit your needs, I think that's so great that you were able to figure out what you wanted.
But I definitely feel like people are still able to become doctors even if they have a disability.
Yeah,
I a lot of people, a lot of creators also who have overcome adversity and have been able to go into that field. And I think a lot of people don't understand that a lot of the physicians who actually have gone through their own illnesses actually end up, being better with their patients, is what I've seen from my own personal experience.
Yeah.
So
No,
that's a
I've
huge
heard that.
thing
Yeah.
because they've been through it themselves.
Like you have more empathy as a doctor and your patient feels even more comfortable because you've lived through that. Having lived experience or like a different perspective can like add like a different component to how you treat your patients, which is so interesting. It's not like valued enough.
I definitely agree, and especially like I have people on my own care team who are patients themselves, and they're like my biggest advocates. They are literally like my ride or dies. They're my go-tos. And I feel like I've had a lot of great physicians as well who, did not have any chronic illnesses, but they probably had like an experience where, they dealt with someone close in their family with one. And I think that makes a big difference. It makes people more passionate and, you know, it makes a difference in like how they treat their patients.
For sure. So you were diagnosed with other conditions throughout college, and the pandemic was happening during that time. So, how was it like getting diagnosed during the pandemic?
It was insane. It was a lot because it was difficult to obtain an appointment because COVID. And then at the time, I was actually going from that period where I was in remission. And then unfortunately, I developed sepsis and it was from a root canal. So I had a root canal done, and unfortunately, bacteria traveled to my bloodstream and I got sepsis. And then that's when all my autoimmune diseases flared up again. So having to navigate that through COVID, being on even more immunosuppressive therapies while there's a virus going around, it was really stressful on me. And I was dealing with this, being isolated from all my friends. So I think it was like a really tough time for me.
As a teenager, you probably didn't know anyone else that had lupus, and you probably felt isolated. So, how did you get resources, or how did you find that community support?
It actually took me a while. So I think that I reached out to the Lupus Foundation and I was actually able to share my story. I think it was like last year I was able to share my story on their website. But um, as a teenager, I looked at the Lupus Foundation for a lot of resources and I would read other people's stories. And thankfully, at my high school, my counselor actually had lupus as well. So I
Oh,
had her to turn to, but her case was very different than mine. She had a very mild case of lupus. So when I'd go to her and be like, well, my kidney is not doing well, or, my liver this is happening with my liver, or like, my bones are not doing too well. She wouldn't be able to, help me as much because she never had that happen to her. So for me, I had to rely mostly on myself because I didn't want to burden other people, especially my family, because my family was supporting me in so many ways, especially financially. My parents worked as much as they could to afford my treatments. So for me, I had to really rely on myself and just hope one day I would be okay.
okay. So you talked about family. I feel like you're just like touching on all these important points and all these people that make up your life and also all these things that have kind of like shaped your journey. So, I mean, I'm glad that you're able to find Lupus Foundation to kind of support you as a teenager. And we talked a little bit about, your like the peers in your environment as a teenager, but as you're growing up, you obviously like had more friends, probably relationships, things like that. So how did you navigate like friendship living with a rheumatic disease? For example, like going out and like feeling really tired or like things like that. How did that work for you?
So beginning my college experience, I actually ended up having to drop out of UCI for a little bit. I withdrew for a couple of quarters. So I wasn't able to get that true freshman experience because I was so sick. I was hospitalized. And then I ended up getting some stem cells, a stem cell treatment, which really helped me get into remission. And then after that, I was able to meet more people and go out. But it was very difficult to go out because I was still healing, but I was still trying to adapt to the college life and trying to fit in and really mold with other people. But it was really tough for me because I couldn't withstand what normal people were doing. So for me, I had to really alter the way that I would go out, or I would have to make sure that I rested before I went out, or I hydrated before I went out, or like, I was eating certain things so I would be able to withstand through the night and be able to live that college experience. And a lot of people didn't see that. Um, I think that I did a really good job at hiding the way that I was sick, that a lot of people didn't believe me that I was sick. So for me, it was definitely like finding that balance and then finding the right people. So I didn't find, friends that really aligned with me until 2020. And actually, a couple of my friends do have autoimmune diseases. So it really helped me because, we were able to relate to each other. And I also had a lot of friends who were in like the medical field, going to pharmacy or going to, medicine, PA, dentistry, who actually were very empathetic and they are honestly amazing. And they gave me as much support as they could. They told me that they were inspired by me multiple times and would help me during my flares. I had people drive me to the ER when I needed to. So I definitely had a great support system throughout college. And I'm really grateful for that.
That's amazing. I feel like that's not the case for a lot of people, or oftentimes you find friends that are not so great or don't really understand or don't really want to learn about it or like care to do things to help you. But on the other hand, like you do find people that are meant to be your friends and like are gonna support you and you're always gonna support them too. So that's amazing. I'm wondering how your parents and family felt when you got your first diagnoses and then like the other ones after.
So my eldest sister is actually a nurse. She's a nurse practitioner. So she was very worried for me. She did a lot of research for me. She advocated for me. My parents were more there for like, financial support because they didn't understand what lupus really was. But, I still had my parents there when I was hospitalized at doctor's appointments. So I think it was really tough because they didn't really understand what lupus was. And for them, it was just, they were just very confused as to how this could happen all of a sudden. Because I went from being like, a healthy gymnast, working out like 4 to 5 times a week, they see their daughter like, doing all these things, like I'm doing like backflips and all this stuff, to the next day being in the ER, like barely able to move. So for me, I tried my best to not burden my family. And it's because there was already a lot going on, So for me, whenever I was having symptoms, I wouldn't voice that I was having symptoms unless like it was emergent. And I feel like sometimes we have to do that because, we're trying to protect our loved ones. And so it was really hard for me to really be 100% because I just didn't want to stress anyone else out.
And then you also come from like a South Asian background. So do you think just in general, like, did you experience like any comments from people?
So being in that community, a lot of people were trying to help by giving me, different like herbal medications and herbal remedies. But at the time, I was just so flared up where I was like, this is not going to work. I need something stronger than that. Or, people were being very, very kind with, offering, more faith, you know, related remedies where they're like, we'll pray for you or we'll, you should do these things to, help with your illnesses. But for me, I had a different approach of how I wanted to tackle down my illnesses and how I wanted to treat them. So the community itself there was a disconnect of understanding of where this disease came from because a lot of people had different, perspectives, like whether it's physical, mental, or spiritual. So I think for me, like I had to really navigate those comments and steer away from them because they just weren't helping me at the time.
It's so important that we raise awareness and like educate people that these are real. Like you need your medication from your rheumatologist or whoever. Yes, you can adapt like lifestyle changes. In reality, like, it's just important that everyone kind of understands that like what are chronic illnesses, what are disabilities, like all those like general things. I feel like a lot of us just don't have that knowledge. And like to be honest, I didn't either before I got diagnosed with juvenile arthritis. So I feel like a lot of us we don't know it, but I think trying to raise awareness, I think you're doing that through your social media accounts and so are we. So doing more of that would be so great for like any community.
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like people are coming from a good place. They just want to
Yeah.
help at the end of the day. So, for me, it was kind of really hard for me to be like, oh, like, I don't need that. It was trying to find a way to cultivate it where I was still being respectful, being able to deny what they were trying to offer me. But I think that everyone has their own healing journey and everyone has different aspects that'll work for them. And it's great that, people are trying to help others. but sometimes there has to be like a boundary of like, how much you should push like, certain treatments or certain remedies because some people have, different types of severities when it comes to their disease.
Yeah, it's definitely hard to like navigate that too. I mean, I haven't had personal experiences with that, but I talk to many people that have, so it's just interesting hearing different cultures and different backgrounds like talk about kind of some of the things that, maybe are instilled in their culture and their beliefs on like how these diseases may manifest or what to do to treat them. But yeah, no, I think it's just an important conversation to have that everyone should be educated about these sorts of things. Hopefully in the future that'll be the case. So I'm wondering if you have like any challenges that you struggle with when it comes to communicating your conditions or your needs.
I think I am the type of person where I struggle with asking for help. So a lot of times in like my TikToks or my social media, people would see that there have been a lot of times where I've driven myself to the ER. And I think that makes people in my life feel like, Sharon, like, what are you doing? Like, just ask us. Like, we'll take you to the ER. Like, don't worry about it. But sometimes I feel like I lack communicating, needing help because I don't want to feel like a burden. And that's really tough to deal with because there are times where it's like I might need to call an ambulance because my flares are so bad. So that's something that I'm working on. That's something that I've been like trying to practice is like, asking for help. And I feel like a lot of people with chronic illnesses struggle to ask for help because we don't want to burden other people. Like it's already such a burden, like, people hearing about like what we're dealing with. But, what about the people who are dealing with it? It's a lot on us as well. So it's just about finding that balance of being able to ask for help.
And it's definitely hard to ask for help. I feel like as like independent people all of our lives, I know like we've both known life without these diseases like prior to that. So like knowing how to navigate life so independently and then realizing like, oh, I can't lift up this pot or I can't like do this today. And then needing to ask for help is it's so frustrating sometimes. I think now I'm like a little better, but like not all the time is someone with you. So like how do you navigate that?
Yeah, I think when you're in a relationship and you need to ask for, help or, you need different things from them, it's all about being comfortable with the other person, I feel like is a big thing. And just the dynamic, if this is somebody that you truly love, like it should just come naturally where you're just able to voice your concerns, but you're still able to, if there are little things that I can do by myself and I know it's not going to flare me, I'll do those, because you don't want to completely burden the other person with everything. So I think it's about finding the balance and making sure like, the other person's on board too.
So we talked a little bit about accommodations, academics, but can you talk a little bit about your experiencing like accessing accommodations throughout, I guess, college, maybe even start from like, I guess, high school too, and what those were?
So in high school, I actually received it's called the 504 plan. I don't know if it's changed. It's been like 6 years since I've been in high school, probably more. So I was on a disability plan where I would actually have to individually give it to each teacher and go over it with them of what my accommodations were. Typically, it was like being able to go to the restroom whenever I needed, or having snacks or water on hand, being able to take extended time on exams, which is really tough because you're in a traditional high school setting. So you're sitting with like a lot of the students. So when people see you, you're having extra time, they're just kind of like confused. And, people ask me questions all the time, like, why do you get extended time? Or I would be sent to the library to take my exams. So it was really different where I essentially felt isolated because of these accommodations, which really sucks because I didn't want to feel that way, but it happened to be that way. But I would say a lot of my high school teachers were very accommodating. And I also got like extended due dates when I was hospitalized or I had flares. So that was really nice. And then transitioning into college, it was a bit harder because as you go up in education, the accommodations actually decrease, which sucks because I was like, as you go on, it gets harder. So in college, I was still able to receive these accommodations, and I actually really loved that UC Irvine offered golf cart rides to your classes. But at times it was difficult because my peers would see me, show up in like a golf cart and they'd be so confused, like, why do you get golf cart rides? Like, you're fine. So it was hard. I think the hardest part was explaining to other people why I'm getting these accommodations. Um, and I was also able, to get extended time on exams, extended due dates. But yeah, again, I was isolated. I had to take my exam at a different location. So it was really hard to hide the fact that I had accommodations. A lot of people knew that I had accommodations, and it was very obvious, given that, I wasn't there for exams. I was showing up in like a golf cart, or, it was really hard to hide that. So for me, like now I'm transitioning to going to grad school. I don't know what those accommodations are going to look like. So it's all about, also communicating with the professors in the school and being like, I need these types of accommodations. So I think the hardest part is actually being able to communicate and like get those accommodations.
The golf cart thing is really interesting. Like I've never heard that before.
I loved UCI for that because I was like, this is so clutch. They'd pick me up in front of my dorm. I'd get driven to campus, and I lived on campus. So it was a lot of hills and I had a lot of joint pain. And I was just like, it's so hard for me to like walk all the way across campus. And I didn't want to get a scooter. I didn't want to get a bike. I was like, this is too much
Yeah.
for me. So the fact that they had that, I was like, you guys are very clutch. I'm so grateful. So
Yeah. I don't know. This sounds like a movie where I study, like in Canada, like we don't have, our weather sucks. So like there's no way there's gonna be any sort of golf cart anywhere here. And also our campuses are like not big enough to like have something like that.
Mhm.
But I wonder like how people that do have disabilities get from class to class. Like now that you mentioned that, I know they had an option for me where I could pick or like say on the form if I couldn't walk to class and stuff, but now I'm kind of curious because this golf cart thing sounds really interesting. That's definitely not happening here though.
I think it was a great option to have for students with disabilities, but it was very obvious.
Yeah.
I it would have dropped me off like in a little bit more discreet location where I could, walk to class a little bit, like, a couple.
Yeah.
But no, it was like right in front of the lecture hall where everyone's standing in line to get in and they drop you off. So for me, I was like, it came to a point where I was like, do I really want to keep using this? But the days that I did have flares, I was like, I need this. So
No,
yeah.
that makes sense. Like you can't hide it. It's really hard, and I feel like yes, it's invisible, but there's some aspects of it, like you mentioned, writing in the other room. I know a lot of people that are like, "Oh, like we didn't see you in the exam room. Where were you?" At the accommodation center writing my exam. Sometimes you don't want to tell people. Like, why do they need to know?
Yeah, it's like especially if like you're just friends in the class, like you're not friends outside of class, and then you have to explain like, oh, well, I have these things wrong with me, or like, I have accommodations, and then people ask questions like why, and then you don't want to explain yourself, but then you feel obligated to, which is so hard. Like it sucks.
It definitely does. I know you kind of talked about remission a little bit, but then I know you've also gotten a hip replacement. So let's talk a little bit about, what it was like getting a hip replacement.
So when I was 18, at the end of 2018, I developed a vascular necrosis in my hips from prednisone usage. So prednisone is a steroid medication used to treat lupus. And one of the side effects include possible bone deterioration. But it's actually rare. But unfortunately, I was one of those people who developed bone deterioration. I actually felt my very first symptom on my move-in day to UCI. I started experiencing some hip pain and I ignored it until I couldn't ignore it anymore during finals week when my hips really were like killing me to the point where I collapsed in my dorm. I had amazing suite mates who drove me to the ER. And the ER, unfortunately, was local and they couldn't treat me because they didn't have enough staff. So, as someone who's chronically ill in so much pain, who believes she needs surgery ASAP, it was really like scary for me to deal with that. I was discharged with a prescription of pain meds and just crutches. So then I had called my parents and I was like, I don't know what to do. Like I'm in so much pain. And my parents lived 3 hours away, so they were like, "You need to go and just Uber to LA, go to the hospital there where they usually treat you, and like they'll take care of you, and we'll meet you there." So I had went there, I got admitted, and then they did diagnose me with the vascular necrosis. They're like, "Yeah, you have vascular necrosis, but you're not at that stage yet where it's able to be replaced. Like it's stage one, but we don't understand why she's in so much pain." So I was dealing with a lot of pain, inflammation. I had like two surgeons tell me, no, we're not going to operate on her because she's 18 and it's not at that stage yet where, we're able to operate. Like she needs to be deteriorated a bit more. But I'm like, I'm in so much pain. What's the pain going to look like when I deteriorate more? So eventually, I actually decided to visit a regenerative medicine clinic after that, after I was discharged. I was in a wheelchair, and they offered me stem cell injections into the hip joint, which would help with the pain, the inflammation, and it could possibly stop the bone deterioration. So I was all for it, but it was very expensive. I would say my parents paid about 5 grand per injection. So that was really expensive. But it worked and it really helped me. And I was able to like go and dance at my cultural show at UC Irvine that spring. This happened in winter. So within like 4 months, like I felt so much better and I wasn't having any more pain. And I was in remission for about a year and a half. And at this time, I also did receive a stem cell IV for my lupus and just for my systemic autoimmune diseases. And that costed my parents a lot of money. It was also like 25 grand, but I would say it was worth it. And then unfortunately in 2020, all my autoimmune diseases returned after I had gotten sepsis from a root canal. And then my hips started bothering me again in 2021. So that's when I started to feel a lot more achiness. I felt like something was tearing like in the hip joint. Like I just felt like a lot of pain. And that's when I had seen another surgeon, and this is the third surgeon I saw at this time, who said, yes, it's progressed, but you're too young for me to operate on you. So at this point, I was like, I have seen three surgeons, none of them want to operate on me. I'm in so much pain. And then I decided to go to USC, whereas I met my surgeon, and he was able to diagnose me with stage 3 of vascular necrosis, which at stage 4, the bone's about to collapse and you need like surgery. So stage 3 was like, you're getting to that stage where you're going to need surgery. So he agreed to operate on me and he did a phenomenal job. And the type of material he used actually lasted 50 years. So I was very grateful for that I'd only need like probably one more surgery within my lifetime. But finding a surgeon who wanted to operate on me was the difficult part because I was so young, yet I was in so much pain and I was in, this stage where the bone hadn't deteriorated enough for it to be operated on for ethical reasons. But, I think that when a patient is in so much pain, you have to weigh out the pros and cons. Because when I was in the hospital, I was like, just operate on me. I don't care. I was at that point where I was like, I know I'm 18, but you just need to operate on me because I'm just so tired of this. But I had gone through 4 years of being from like stage 1 to stage 3, where the pain was managed for a little bit and then it got worse. And then I had to wait to get an appointment with my surgeon. I had to wait for an appointment for my surgery. So I had to really navigate how to manage my pain, how to deal with everyday life, how to deal with my social life while having like this condition. So after having my hip replacement, I felt so much better. The healing part was not fun. I think that was the most difficult part for me, but I'm proud to say like today I'm able to go to the gym, I'm able to be more mobile. I have a lot of my life back and that I didn't have prior to my hip replacement. So I think that everything just became so much better afterwards.
No, I'm so glad that it became so much better. In terms of like financial stuff, like your parents have to pay out of pocket. How did insurance work for you?
So for regenerative medicine services, they're actually not covered by insurance. So my parents had to take out a loan for my health. And that was really hard because it's a lot of money. And till this day, I owe them everything. I'm very grateful for all the support that I've had, but I know it's not an option for a lot of people because of the prices. Like it's so expensive. But when you look at the pros and cons of, getting these treatments, like it's probably a treatment that you only need once or twice in your lifetime, and then, you could be good. But it's hard because insurance doesn't cover it, and we don't know why. There's, speculations that it's because, it might not work for all patients, but, there's a lot of drugs that also don't work for a lot of patients. So, I mean, it is a lot of money. It is a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, it is, but I'm glad that they're there to support you and everything. It sounds so great. So, aside from, trying the regenerative medicine and then like the hip replacement, things like that, how like what has your medication journey been like? Like how do you, because you have so many conditions, like are you on like a bunch of different medications? How does it work?
Um, Actually, right now I'm not on any meds, so very grateful for that. But at that time, I was on a lot of steroids, a lot of chemotherapy, a lot of immunosuppressive medications. So for a lot of these meds, like steroids are used widely for a lot of conditions. So I was able to be used for not only like the lupus, but the MCTD and then for the arthritis. And so it would help, but I can't use them anymore because it deteriorated my bones. So as of right now, I actually went on that journey where I saw regenerative medicine again last year, because I wasn't doing well. My kidneys were being affected. I had gone through a massive flare after my hip replacement. So I started healing holistically, actually. Things within my body. I started eating a certain type of diet. I drink a certain type of water. Um, I go to the sauna. I exercise like 3 to 4 times a week. And so implementing those changes really helped me in my lifestyle. Um, and it really changed my life. But it also depends per person what's going to work for them. So I think that's the biggest thing is that people may see my journey, but there's different types of journeys that are tailored to different people based on their, their history, their what symptoms they're having and like what their allergies are. And so it's all about, finding something that works for you.
For sure. Thanks for sharing like what you do. And I guess that also helps with like the pain management and you still see your specialist for checkups and things like that. So has it all been like going well now? Like are your symptoms much better than before?
Definitely. My rheumatologist was so shocked. She looks at my labs and she's like, they look perfect. Like, you are perfect. She's like, just keep doing whatever you're doing. But she still offers me, like, hey, if you want another infusion of this medication, you are more than welcome to, get it if you have a flare again. Or, she will try to, incorporate Western medicine as well because, she still has to be careful and, make sure that I don't get a massive flare again and make sure that we're managing my disease as best as possible. Like, um, for me, I want to avoid those infusions because they did not make me feel well as much as I feel well right now. So I've been off of my infusions for almost 10 months now. So, and I feel amazing. Like, I feel like I'm able to do a lot more compared to where I was a year ago.
Okay, that's great. I'm like, wow, okay, so that's amazing. And I'm so glad that like things are working out for you because you've definitely been through a lot. And I feel like, especially being a young adult and like going through this whole journey, like with all this, it's a lot. So
It's a lot, yeah.
I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about your initiatives and interests. So you're a content creator on TikTok, sharing your journey and your experience living with an autoimmune disease and other chronic illnesses. So why and when did you start posting about this?
I actually posted my first video that gained a lot of attention around November of 2022, which was a month before my hip replacement. There was a trend going on at that time where it was like moments that altered my brain chemistry. It was kind of a little trend where people like would post like traumatic things that happened, that really affected their lives. So I posted about my lupus and it got like 200,000 views. I had gained like 2,000 followers, and I was like, okay, this is a real thing. People started asking me a lot of questions. Like, they're like, how did you get diagnosed? Like, what other symptoms are you having? Or like, they would relate to a lot of things that I would post of like, we're on these treatments that are like same as like cancer patients where we're getting chemotherapy, but we're not treated the same. People dismiss lupus or don't think it's real. And it was really tough for, me to deal with that of like, my disease doesn't seem seen as important. So a lot of people related to that. And then it just sparked something in me to keep going. And I shared a lot after my hip replacement. And I would just post for other people and then also for myself. And I grew like a little community. I'm at a little over 15K now. So it's like, it inspires me to keep going because it makes people not feel alone. And I know that my 14-year-old self would really need this, like some people to relate to and to know that you're not alone.
That's amazing. And being like on social media as a person like living with these chronic illnesses is definitely like hard to like share your journey. Were you always sort of like outgoing and like wanted to talk about it? I know you said you're like super honest and like open about your journey. Was that always the case?
No, definitely not. I'm in real life, I'm more of an introvert. I would say I'm like an extroverted introvert or introverted extrovert. When I'm around people that I'm comfortable with and when I'm around my loved ones, I'm more extroverted, but around new people, I tend to be a bit more reserved and shy. So for me to like be on social media, it's definitely out of my comfort zone. But I feel like it's a community that just continues to grow. And I think that, you know, I want to be a voice for other people. I want to help other people. So I do have to break out of my shell eventually.
I know, same here. It was so hard for me to like talk about my arthritis or like anything online. I just I feel like we always think about, what are like other people gonna think and like all that stuff. Like it's bound to be something you think about, even though you don't really
Yeah.
want that to be something you think about. But I think it's been so rewarding because when you see people interact and like relate and like you feel like you're really supporting them because they feel supported by the content that you make, which is amazing.
I agree. And like also talking about the diseases, I feel like it's so necessary. I feel like there is not enough, awareness out there for these diseases. And I feel like as time goes on, I see a lot more people getting diagnosed with chronic illnesses, autoimmune diseases. One of my best friends actually texted me like a few days ago and told me he got diagnosed with Crohn's. And it broke my heart because I was like, this guy is one of the healthiest gym bros I know. Like he's like healthy, doing all this good stuff. And like he got diagnosed with an autoimmune disease too. And it's crazy because it's like we need more awareness on what these diseases are, like, what are potential causes, how do you deal with them? What's disease management look like? And the more awareness there is, the more it helps other people.
Yeah. So I usually end off the podcast episode with an advice segment. Having an autoimmune disease can be a lonely journey. What would you say to individuals that find themselves lacking a chronic disease community?
I would definitely say to look online and then look within because I feel like when I was dealing with a lot of my own diseases, the only person that I could really turn to is myself. But obviously that's hard for a lot of people, but I feel like there's a lot of like support groups and a lot of like online communities that can truly help you. We have TikTok, we have Instagram, there's also YouTube, there's other social media platforms as well. And just to know that you're not alone and they're always welcome to come to my page if they relate to me or have any other autoimmune diseases similar to me. And like, I'm always willing to help and like talk to other people as well. So yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on today's podcast episode. We talked about, your diagnosis journey, the symptoms that kind of led to all these diagnoses. You talked about, your experience getting stem cell therapy and then also a hip replacement. And then we talked about your diagnosis affecting friendships, also family support that you got, as well as relationships. We also talked about, the academic world, the getting accommodations, what that looks like in like high school versus college, and now you're going to grad school, what that may look like as well. And last but not least, we kind of talked about, lifestyle changes that you've made, as well as your advocacy work on TikTok. So everyone, make sure to like, comment, subscribe. I will leave Sharon's social media channels and platform links down below, so you can definitely give her a follow. And I'll see everyone in 2 weeks on Take a Pain Check. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
I can't hide, 'cause growing pains are keeping me